After seeing over 3,000 decks in total over 3 years as a VC, I started spotting the same pattern on what makes decks fail and what makes investors actually want to take a call with you. So in this video, I'm going to go through 2 different pitch decks of founders who are looking to fundraise right now to show you what is going wrong with their deck, what actually works and how to improve them so you can avoid these traps and create a deck that stands out and actually makes you fundraise in the end. If you also want to get your pitch deck reviewed by me for free, then click the link down below so I can review your pitch deck. And the first point is super important because it really sets the scene for the investor to understand your pitch deck without the investor getting confused. And to give you more context on that, whenever you're building a pitch deck, one of the worst things you can do is just create a pitch deck for yourself. And that's why it's so hard to sometimes create a pitch deck. What you have to do is you have to empathetically think about what the investor's going through and their mindset when they're seeing this pitch deck. And now the biggest problem with a pitch deck is that you aren't there to actually explain it to them. You can't tell them everything that's in your head. And secondly, the investor doesn't have as much knowledge as you do, and they're coming in pretty cold to what you're doing. Now, the biggest problem where founders go wrong, and one of the easiest unlocks for you, is what I call descriptive titles. Now, as you can see from this pitch deck, for example, the titles are not descriptive enough of exactly what they're doing. And how a VC usually works in terms of how they do a pitch deck is what they'll do is they'll scroll through and they'll just look at the titles and decide if it makes sense. Now, the biggest problem with this one, for example, is these are very generic titles. The hidden threat to team performance. How am I, when I'm scrolling through this and deciding if this is great and interesting and great to me, how am I going to understand what that means? You need to make these a lot more descriptive in how they do it. And how we make sure we do that in the correct manner is, for example, you could literally use this as the title. This is actually a really good title, right? What you're meant to be doing is creating titles on a slide in which I can go through and just look at the titles. I should be able to go through this pitch deck and just look at the titles and actually decide on whether or not this makes sense. And I can pretty much get all of the numbers. One way in which you can do this really easily is, I'll just use this space here, for example. What you want to do is on a Google document, put down, let's say that you decide it's going to be 10 slides, right? So you put down this, a Google document, and then you have to then make a actual story and conversation about what makes you great and why someone should invest into you, only using titles. So 100 characters max, making sure that they're descriptive. And then if everything doesn't flow, if the next title doesn't go into the next one and it doesn't read like a story, then you've done it wrong. The problem with you building this, and this is you've just been told to put things in, I can't go through this and make a decision on whether or not I like you. Another example of doing this is this company here. You just say 2 independent products, 1 shared vision. That doesn't explain anything to me about why I should be excited. You say 2 independent products, 1 shared vision. That doesn't give me anything. It's not descriptive and why. It doesn't put me to want to care about anything from this. Then you just say the leadership team. You just say the world of property is still stuck in the dark ages. At no point with me reading the title am I actually getting anything from you and thinking I need to be connected to this, because that's the first thing an investor does. They flick through the pitch deck, they look at the titles and decide if they want to spend more time with you. Now, the second one is connected to this, and without this, you can't really create something in which someone wants to take a meeting with you. And both these pitch decks, unfortunately, are missing this. And coming back to my first point about descriptive titles, with investors, like I said before, they're coming into this cold. They don't know as much as you, they never will. And because of that, they need to get connected to what you're doing. And when they don't have a sense of feeling connected emotionally to your problem, to why that matters, why now, they're never really going to go through your pitch deck and you're going to end it. So what I really want you to do is I want you to spend the first 3 to 4 slides are the most important. And that's really what kind of point number 2 is. Creating an emotionally connected story within the first 3 slides that feeds into allowing them to be excited by what you're doing. So if we go back to the 2 pitch decks, for example, Nestlink, you just say this, you say making property transactions plain and simple and connected. okay, great, but that doesn't really mean anything to me. I don't know why I should care about that. I then go into here and you say two independent products. You've not told me anything about why I should care about this, why there is a problem here that needs solving, why the two products and one shared vision make sense. So I'm coming in cold and wondering what the hell is going on here. Why should I care about this? You then go into the leadership team, and we'll go through that in a second, but you again, descriptive title. You don't tell me about why the team is great or anything. You just say leadership team. So the first two slides, I've got nothing. There is no point in me where I'm saying to myself, wow, okay, this needs to be solved. And this is the company that's going to do it. And there's all of these problems that are happening, right? It's only really when you come to here, which is, again, it's not very good. Only in the third slide, but at this point, fourth technically, have I actually become interested in what you're doing? And at this point, I probably would have already switched up the pitch deck off, if I'm being honest. This is only time you start, and it's very generic. And then you go into the problem. But again, no descriptive titles. You just say the problem. But you don't really go into why this is such a problem. You've got something really small here about 1.5 billion pounds per year is lost. Why don't you say that as the title? Why don't you say 1.5 billion pounds worth of properties are lost every year because of this? And this is what's happening. And these are the reasons why it's happening. You should be putting that at the forefront. As soon as I read that, I should want to read into it from the descriptive title and then being like, wow, how is this not being solved? Why? What's the way in which you can do this? That's how you need to make this feel. And from this pitch deck, you're not doing it. Now, secondly, you need to make sure that it actually feels connected to what you're doing. And this is specific to this company. The problem with this pitch deck is that you're talking about two different companies at the same time, and you're not really connecting it. You just say one shared vision, but they feel completely different in what they're doing, and two different types of companies with two different types of revenue model and all these kind of things. Investors are just going to switch off. They're not going to believe you have focus. So for example, you're talking about, this is all Nestlink. You're talking about Nestlink. You're saying you've got this much revenue. Then you're going into planning flow, and you're talking about two different companies at this point in time. And then you're saying there's a planning nightmare. And then you're saying it only reaches £9 million ARR. It just doesn't make any sense. And no investor is going to want to invest into two different companies, one that's only going to make £9 million ARR if you get 25% of the market, which is a lot of the market. It just doesn't make any sense. So you need to make this much clearer. Focus on the first three slides, how that relates to what you're doing, how they're connected if they are, or just raise for one company. It's just not going to work. If I go to the other pitch deck, it's exactly the same, right? You say the problem, but no real emotional connection to it. I would also just take out this like stock photo. This doesn't look very good. As a whole, this pitch deck's not designed very well. But there's no emotional connection to why should I care about this? Why is it the biggest threat to the team? Why is 1.2 trillion annually being destroyed? How is this gonna affect the future if the current world stays the same? At no point am I getting connected to this that I want to spend more time doing this. And then you just go into kind of a $1.2 trillion gap, but you don't really talk about how it's connected to what you're doing. And it just doesn't have that connection emotionally, okay? And what happens then is, because I'm not emotionally connected to you, the next problem with slide decks come into the play, and it just exasperates everything. And what point number 3 is bad product slides that don't actually really explain your product properly and the impact it solves. If we go back to the slides, for example, here you just say AI avatars, real scenarios, real results, but you don't actually show it. You don't really show what you're doing. You just show a picture here, right? You show a picture here of what you're doing, great. But you're not, and you do features here, but at no point are you talking about your impact. Like, genuinely, what are you doing? For example, you say here, retention is 75% increased compared to normal lectures. What does it look like for you? You say real results, you're not saying anything. So at this point, if we go from the beginning, okay, I've not felt any connection to what you're doing. I don't really know if I care. I don't really know what's the point of it. Then you go into this, so I'm like, okay, so you've just got a picture of someone. I don't really know if that matters to me. You've just got all of these features that I don't know if I matter or care, and I don't really know the impact in your world. And the problem with this is you're not showing me what makes you the best and why you're going to win. So at this point, I just don't think you're going to be successful. And at this point, I would have rejected you, by the way. I would have just said no to you. Now, if we go to the second pitch deck, it's exactly the same, right? You're just saying we're transforming it into one clean process. Okay, but why does that matter? Why? How is that going to affect it? You're saying by having the title could be something like, by making it one clean process, we make the 30% who fall through not, or something like that's probably too long. You can find something around there that you can find that's much better. Again, all of these are features, right? With the timeline and stuff. I have not understood the impact that you are creating. And when you don't show the impact of what you're doing in a product, no investor's going to feel connected to it, especially if you don't make them feel connected emotionally, because they're just not going to think you're going to win. And that's really how you fail at this. Now, the next thing that founders do wrong all the time is connected to how this relates to how big you can be and really showing the market size or potential very well. If we go back to the pitch decks, when you think about market sizing and when you think about the potential of what you're doing, where founders go wrong all the time is they focus too much on what I call top-down research and not enough around business model and then how you actually can create a massive market from that. So if we use this example, you're just saying, for one, this is just a confusing title. Doesn't really make any sense. You're not making it as easy as possible to say per transaction, per what it is, and like all of these different tiers. It's just very confusing. You need to simplify this as much as possible and really just focus on, this is your main revenue driver, right? Focus on the main revenue driver. But secondly, when we're thinking about this, you're just saying total addressable market. What you need to do is you need to go from business model, how we make money, then go into, and this is how many people there are. So a bottom up approach, and this is how big that market can be. Now, when it comes to VCs, for example, and when you're raising venture capital money, you're saying here that the whole TAM is 200 million pounds. If we look at this here, right, you're saying 50% of it is 106 million ARR. That is just too little. It's too small. You need to be thinking in much bigger markets. Otherwise, investors are just going to switch off. So for this pitch deck, for example, an investor would switch off because they don't believe you're big enough. So you can say, this is how we reach 100 million ARR, but it can't be 50% of the total addressable market. It has to be a lot more, a lot less, sorry. You need to be able to show that you could potentially reach 1 billion, 2 billion, even more in revenue potential as you go forward into the future. So for this one, it would just be too small. And then when we go through here, a great example again is 9 million ARR just doesn't really make any sense. Whereas for this company, you're saying that it does the opposite, right? When it comes to the revenue size, you're saying that in 5 years' time, you're going to make $1 billion. And I see founders do this all the time. You're not going to make $1 billion. No company has, even like the AI companies that are going crazy right now that have got to $100 million in ARR in a year. That's crazy. Or you're not going to be, I'll just be frank, you're just not going to be able to reach $1 billion in ARR in 5 years' time. It's just so unheard of. Secondly, on that, you're saying 3 million licenses here, but you're not talking about of how many licenses the potential are, what it takes for you to do it. So for simple things, what I would do is, what does it take for you to get to 100 million ARR? What does it actually look like? How many licenses? How many organizations is that? How easy is that for you to do? There is no real understanding of how this sits in the real world because you just decided to put in a big number, go for 1 billion for no reason, of just because someone told you to, rather than actually being specific of how you reach that billion or what it actually looks like as a whole kind of market. And the next thing is really about how, and it comes back to all of the things we just spoke about, but fundamentally, are you the right team to build this? And where I see founders go wrong all the time with pitch decks on this is they aren't very descriptive on who they are and what makes them great. And the biggest problem there is that 70% of the reason why an investor will invest into you is because of your team. So if you're not being descriptive in how your team is or what you've done, no investor's going to like you and want to speak to you. If you really are descriptive and you tell them how amazing you are and how you're perfect for this in the right manner, that could be a reason alone that they actually want to have a meeting with you. So for this company, for example, you just say led by experts in product, tech, and growth. Again, not a it's not the best title. You can be more descriptive of we have the everything we need for the market or whatever like that. But the biggest thing that you're missing out on is you've not actually said what you've done. You've just said you have 50 plus enterprise applications. You said 10 plus enterprise, 20 years go to market. Okay, that doesn't tell me anything. You could have been a janitor. Like, what is he? A janitor at Starbucks? What did you do at Alcon? Were you in HR? Were you doing something like what were you doing? Did you have a team? Would you never have a team? Did you start from the ground up? I don't know what makes you great about this industry and what you've done. So I want you to do 2 or 3 bullet points and be super specific of what you've done. Like specifically say, I built a team of 20 people with a revenue of 20 million, or I scaled a team of 10, or we did exactly this for this team that related to this, whatever it is. You need to actually be specific on what they've done. So for example, Nick, what did he do at Light & Wonder? Was he the head of something? Was he the CTO? Did he build out the whole product? Did he take the product from this point to this point? For Mark, he said he's at 20 years of GTM. What did he do at Starbucks? Did he scale into new cities in the same way that you are? Did he hire in a team doing this? What has he done that makes you want to take him as a chief growth officer? There's going to be a reason why you've done it. And you need to show people what they've actually done. Exactly the same for this business, right? Like I said, remember we need to completely rejig how we do this pitch deck. But again, here, you've just said here that you director of a design practice, and then you're at TBC, but you've not said what you've done. You've not said anything. For Vishnu, you've just said that has 10 years of experience, but you've not actually said what those companies have done. What did Join My Trip do? What did Faces do? What did the product get to? How many teams, if he's a UI lead, what was the UI like? How many people in the team did he have to hire, and when you're going to do it? Now, the next one is super important because it really depends on your competitors and how much you're better. And all of these kind of stack onto each other, hopefully you can see. But this is a really big problem I see with pitch decks all the time. And that's when it comes to the competitive landscape and how you're better and what you're doing. Now, what I see most companies do is they do this kind of generic slide about why they are better or worse, basically. And there's a really big problem when you build out a slide like this. And the reason why is you're not really telling investors what makes you better than all of these. Which part is it? Is it the built-in secure messaging? Is it the upfront readiness? Is it the actual cross-party transparency that's going to make you win? Is it all of them put together? What's the reason for why will everyone join you? And that's the biggest problem with both of these pitch decks and a lot of pitch decks that are out there. Someone told you to look at Airbnb's pitch deck or something, and you're told, oh, I have to copy this, or you get 20 million people telling you all the stuff about pitch decks without taking a step back and thinking about, what am I actually doing that's unique? What am I doing that's different? Why can't I, for example, copying you, actually beat you? What do you know that you're doing specifically different that's going to mean you win? And if you focus on those things, you can then build a story-driven pitch deck that actually makes sense to you. And then when it comes to the competitive analysis slide, for example, you can focus on, hey, this is what makes us great. This is what we're doing differently. Everyone else is doing really cool stuff. But the reason why we win is because of this specific reason. And that's why we're going to do it, because we are cheaper, faster, easier to use, easier to onboard, whatever it is. These are the reasons why, and really focusing on the impact on it again. If we go back to this pitch deck, for example, it's exactly the same. You don't say why you win. You just put some tick boxes and hoping for the best. Like, all of these have raised a crap ton of money, and you're not really saying about why you're going to be better than them, realistically. Like, you're saying some is for gamification, some is storytelling, some is feedback loops. But what is the specific thing that you're doing that's allowing you to beat them all? Why are they not going to be better than you? What is the impact of you being able to have all of these in together that allows you to be cheaper, faster, better, whatever it is? What's the biggest thing when someone used Cicero, for example, that means that they can't do it? At no point am I really understanding what makes you great and what makes you different. And That's a big reason why you're going to fail to fundraise and not going to get investors to ever want to take a meeting with you, is because you're not showing what makes you different and great. Now, the last one is just about the ask slide. And the biggest problem with the ask slide is you just don't have any milestones on how you're raising. So, for example, if we go through this slide deck, you're saying here you're trying to raise $2 million to accelerate expansion. Investment terms, fine. Like, you can have them if you need to. I get it. If you're going to do a safe, it's okay. But I would just take them out. You can talk about that in person. The biggest problem here is you've done the generic pie chart, which everyone tells you to do, which isn't necessarily bad. You can keep it in. But all you've said is 1 million ARR in 12 months and 18 months runway. You've not told me anything about what your milestones are. You've not told me how many people you're going to hire. What does 1 million ARR look like in terms of customers? What does the pipeline look like? You've not really told me what your milestones are. So I don't really understand if you're great or not. And this is the biggest problem with the ask slide. What you want to do is this is a good title, by the way. That's a good descriptive title. Takeaway fundraise. You can take away this. Focus on, instead call this milestones, and focus on actual number-driven milestones that investors are going to get excited by. This is definitely one, right? This is a good one. Take it. This is not good. And then you need to add more and more as you go into it. If you take this one, for example, this is where the ask is not particularly good. So just take away valuation. Never have valuation ever in a slide deck. It is not worth it. It's not useful to you at all. Secondly, these are not milestones. You need to talk in particular what you're going to be able to do with the money. Be really specific on what you're doing. And then the biggest problem that you're doing is you've got a range. And the biggest problem with a range is investors, as soon as they see a range of what you're trying to raise, they just don't believe you know your numbers and they don't believe you know exactly what you want. So don't say 600k to 1 million pounds. Say 750 pounds if you really wanted to, and especially because of the range. I don't know how you could have a range that nearly doubles, by the way, and then how that doesn't relate to your valuation being the same. So this is why valuation is really silly, by the way, to put in a deck. But when you have a range, investors don't know what you want, and because they don't know what you want, they're just going to be like, this person doesn't know their numbers. They don't know how much they need. So I would just put a specific number that can go down or up. Usually it's going to go up, right? So let's say that you're going to put 750k to raise. If you get oversubscribed, great, it goes to 1 million. If it's a little bit less, you can pick and choose and say, actually, you want to do 600k. That's okay. But at least you put a number down and then you can change it as the round goes rather than put it in the deck. I know it's been quite detailed and me going on tangents a little bit, but I hope that's been really helpful for how you think about building a pitch deck. But the thing is, a pitch deck's not ever going to be the reason why you get investment. It's how you conduct yourself in a meeting. So if you want to, check out this next video where I go through the exact system of how to build a narrative arc that makes investors love what you're doing and want to invest into you.